Hello and welcome. My name is Milad Aslaner and I'm with SentinelOne. Today, I want to talk with you about a typical day as a SOC analyst. As we know, our line of work can be extremely reactive. Typically, something has to happen for people to listen to what we have to say, even though it is quite important. So when an attack happens, that's when they call us in and they say, expect us to do quick investigations and quickly contain the threat. But we know as security operation folks that this isn't always that easy, because you do need to perform often manual correlation work, understanding what has happened, how it happened, when it happened, and we need to follow our incident response process and the relevant playbooks, and so it can become extremely time consuming. Within the team, within the Security Operations Center, we face a number of challenges. The first one is the volume of alerts. As we all know, the volume is exponentially increasing year over year. There are some interesting stats around that. For example, 70% have more than doubled the volume of security alerts in the past 5 years, right? We also see that 93% cannot address all security alerts in the same day. So pretty much reality where we have more alerts than we can handle. That's why we are running into something we call the alert fatigue, right? When we look into security automation, right, it's an area that is supposed to help us as SOC analysts to become more efficient, to be able to cover more important work in a more timely manner by having technology aiding our investigation. But yet 65% of companies today say that the security of automation has only been partially automated in order to process security alerts. And then, of course, when it comes to managing alerts, we have all sort of different challenges when we look into how today the CM market and the technologies operate, right? So no surprise here that we see that 80%, 88% of the folks that participated in this research firm that has been published under dark reading said that 88% have challenges when it comes to leveraging their CM solution. But beside the team challenges that we have inside the SOC, there are also individual challenges for us as SOC analysts. The first one, we have way too many tools, right? In order for us to complete an end-to-end investigation, we are jumping from one console to the other, opening one tool to the other, possibly RDPing into some systems in order to do our investigation. We need to sometimes, in order to use specific tools, collect the physical machine in order to run that particular forensic program that we procured and using. And it just adds on the complexity that we are facing. The second is we have so much noise happening, right? So if you look into our CM, our XDR, all these different terminologies and products, you will see that there's so much information out there, which is great in theory, right? We do want to have as much information as possible. However, sometimes it becomes a little bit like finding the needle in the haystack, right? So we need to understand, how do we balance like between having all these signals and then filtering out the noise out of that, right? So that's another aspect of the challenge we face day to day, right? That's why we need to do a lot of the manual correlation, right? We need to filter a lot of information out in order to understand what is it that really matters for us as SOC analysts as part of that particular investigation. The third aspect, it's very repetitive, right? What we do. Of course, we see like in these amazing Hollywood productions, these gigantic screens, and it's always looks like doomsday, and then we're about to stop this attacker in a very novel way. But reality, I mean, these can happen, but the reality is that some of our aspect of work, when we do these incident handlings, it is very repetitive, right? So if you think about particular as there's a tier 1 SOC analyst, right, where our primary goal is to do the triage and the initial evidence gathering, maybe, right? It's very repetitive because typically we have these playbooks for these different type of attacks, and we are running it and we're doing the same steps over and over again, right? We prepare an environment for the forensics works, right? We deploy relevant tools. We run these 3 commands in order to do the forensic data collection, right? Then we push that information into possibly our sandbox technology. We take that report and probably because it's disconnected to everything else, we actually copy paste maybe that information into our ticketing or SOAR solution whatsoever, or CM, right, in order to make it available for the tier 2 analysts when we escalate the case, right? A lot of information that is required. Unfortunately, a lot of this information is gathered through repetitive work that we have to do over and over again. And let's face it, yes, tools are great and we have too many of them, but still we have blind spots, right? So still we don't see 100% of what has happened, right? So that's why we need to do a lot of manual work in order for us to stitch the different small pictures together in order to have this masterpiece, right? And then, of course, the last one, there are so many bottlenecks, right? I mean, for us as SOC analysts, what I think truly or from at least from my perspective, what helps me geek out is the time I get to spend like doing forensics work, analyzing MDF tables, looking at the memory dumps in order to identify suspicious activities, in order to stitch the information together to understand is it really commodity malware, or is this like an APT targeted attack in my environment? And if that's the case, I want to go all in there, understand how they're doing, what they're doing, and how I can contain the threat, right? But reality, again, we are pulled into different meetings. We need to coordinate with a lot of people. There are a lot of processes that are important, but there are a lot of processes that we need to follow, following the procedures of the organizations, right? And there's this constant challenge, like between balancing between people, process, and technology, particular as the problems are keep scaling, right? The magnitude of attacks that we are facing today is not the same that we were facing 5 or 6 years ago, right? We have different needs as defenders in order to quickly detect and respond to cyber attacks today. So all these issues combined, it becomes really complex, manual, intense work, very reactive, and frankly, very expensive, right? If you think about like the time to detect, the time it takes to resolve an incident, the manual work from us itself, right? And historically, right, we were trying to grow the team, like making these business cases in order to get more analysts in, but we can only scale to so many, right? This model of keep recruiting doesn't work, particular as we know there is a skill gap anyhow in our industry, in our line of work. So even if we would continue get the headcounts in order to get more colleagues into the team, often will not find the relevant folks with the relevant qualifications that are motivated coming into this line of work. So how does a typical incident response look like, right? This one I took out of the NIST framework, right? So this is NIST SP 800-61R2, right? Which talks about the so-called incident response life cycle, okay? So, and this is important to understand, right? To understand really how this typical workflow will looks like for many of us as SOC analysts to visualize or articulate, hey, what is it really we're doing when we are handling an incident? The very first step is what NIST calls preparation. Preparation, while if you think about it, isn't that common, particular for like an incident responder, right? Because by definition, something has happened and now we need to respond to it, right? It is still critical to understand how do we prepare for an incident, right? What is our communication plan? How do we involve possibly authorities if relevant in certain geos, depending on rules and regulations and so on? How do we handle certain time of incidents in terms of the playbooks that we want to run for that particular attack type, right? So that's really all about the preparation phase, right? We want to make sure we are prepared when an attack happens, not if an attack happens, because I think today it's fair to say, and it's acknowledged, that we are living into this state where we need to assume breach, right? We know we are being targeted. It's a matter of time when the attacker knocks on our virtual doors. We need to be prepared for that. The second part is the detection and analysis part. Okay, in that part, really, it's all about understanding who are the different attack vectors an attacker could use in order to get in, right? It's a great way, for example, to segue into like MITRE and what they do with the attack framework, right? This is a great way where you can maybe possibly exercise, right, against the MITRE attack framework to understand the different tactics and techniques and how it maps towards your own organizational capabilities to detect and analyze certain attacks. It also helps, of course, for like from a simulation perspective. Maybe you want to simulate an attack base by leveraging the attack framework, right, in order to understand how your incident response plan looks like, or how it looks like in the real when an attack happens. Right, so as part of detection analysis, we want to understand the attack vectors that are out there, like spear phishing attachment, malicious USBs, and so on, just to name like two examples, right? And then understanding how to remediate it. We want to understand the different signals that are available, right? We talked about there's a lot of noise, right? But let's understand, like, what does high fidelity signals look like for me? How do I get them, right? What are the data sources available for me, either open source or commercially available or internally available, that I can leverage to tap into the threat intel in order to be able to detect faster, in order for me to analyze faster what's happening. And then, of course, when it comes to the actual incident, we want to make sure we understand how to analyze. We want to do the boring stuff, right? We need to do the documentation, right? So that's another key aspect, right? How do we document what has happened, right? What does it look like in order to us to share a security notification or bulletin, however it's called for your organization? Who are the stakeholders that need to be involved, and when should they be involved, right? That's another key aspect to really understand, like, to who do I communicate what and when, right? And then, of course, we need to prioritize. We already covered the typically most organizations cannot handle the incidents as they come in on the same day. There's no surprise there. So we need to prioritize, right? Is a commodity malware that is running on an endpoint the same criticality as a nation state attack that's happening? Probably not, right? So we need to understand, how do we prioritize between like low, medium, high severity incidents? And then lastly, Again, the notification aspects. When is it the time to involve possibly our execs, right? When do we need to make sure we brief our CEO because something big has happened? When do we brief, for example, local law enforcement, depending on the regulations and laws, and so on. So that's really the detection analysis phase of the incident response lifecycle. The next phase is the so-called containment, eradication, and recovery phase. Now, in this phase, really, it's about understanding how do we actually stop bleeding in the environment, right? So the attacker is in there. We need to understand how do we get them out of there as soon as possible, right? So in that phase, you want to pick your containment strategy, right? What is your containment strategy for a typical ransomware attack, right? Do you have one? If not, go back to preparation and make sure you have a strategy in place for that, right? Because when an attack happens, you don't have the luxury of guessing like what should we do. We don't have the opportunity like to pause the attack, do our research then in order then to get started, right? So in this phase, you're picking the containment strategy. You're moving into I call it evidence mode, where you're actually looking for the different evidences you need. So you're looking to gather and handle the evidences. This could be doing a remote shell connection to your endpoints through your EDR or XDR solution, right? In order to, through PowerShell, Bash, whatever that capability supports, connect to the endpoint and then gather additional log files, evidences, and so on. You want to identify the attacking hosts, right? Super important. Like, it's not just about essentially eliminating like maybe quarantining the payload, right? But how the payload got there in first place, and to who is this payload on that endpoint communicating? Like, where is the C2 located, right? You want to understand that aspect, because it's critical, so that you can maybe you need to determine and say, okay, this particular IP address that is used as the C2 command and control server, we're going to put it on the deny list on our network side, on our endpoint side, to make sure that all other endpoints can no longer communicate to the attacker's C2 channel. Right. And then the last step is, of course, the eradication and the recovery from the attack, right? So this is really about essentially ensuring we are back up and running as a business, ensuring business continuity in a way where we're gonna get rid of the problem essentially, and then recover from the attack, right? So then you're looking like into support where your technology can aid you with the rollback from a ransomware attack if possible, right? You're looking into understanding, okay, if this was a golden ticket attack, how do we actually now go into reset our tickets, reset Active Directory, and so on. And then the last step, which is unfortunately always most of the time forgotten, slash it falls into the category of we'll do it later, is post-incident activities. Okay, and I get it, right? We have too many alerts to handle. There's something out there called alert fatigue. We're constantly under fire. However, this will constantly happening because we are not taking the time needed in order to do a retrospect, in order to understand what has happened, how did it happen, when did it happen, and what can we do to prevent at least the same attack method and payload and whatnot to get in first place again, right? So this is the time where you essentially come together in order to discuss the lessons learned of an incident. You're looking at the different incident data that had been collected, right? All the different evidence pieces to understand, to do a retrospect, to do a deep dive on them, right? And then you want to store probably the evidence, right, for a longer duration of time in case you will need it again for if something similar happens, right? To have data you can correlate to understand maybe similarities and so on. But also maybe sometimes, like again, from a law enforcement perspective, you might need to have that piece of evidence stored for a longer duration of time in case something comes up from that angle. But if we think about all that, right, on a high level, it's really there are like a few questions that we are trying to answer as part of the incident response life cycle. The first, what is the scope of breach, right? Who is impacted? Like, what are the assets that has been targeted that this attacker is trying to get in or has succeeded to get in? This could be like your endpoints, regardless, like if it's servers, workstations, and so on, of course, right? So we need to determine as fast as possible what is the scope of breach. We want to know, how did the attacker get in? Right? Was it a malicious USB thumb drive? Was it a phishing campaign, spear phishing? Was it a remote exploitation of a new CVE that had been patched by the vendor, but we haven't updated yet? We need to know, right? We need to stop that attack entry vector to remain open, essentially. The next step, we need to understand who is being targeted, right? And here I differentiate between the scope of breach and who is being targeted, right? Because we want to understand, essentially, ideally, like, what is the end goal of the attacker, right? Are they on a path to reach for example, the computer, the endpoint from an accountant? Are they trying to reach an exec computer? And so on and so on. We want to understand who is being targeted, right? We want to know since when they're targeted, right? In order for us to understand, is this a longer project that has been going on? Is this something that just started, right? We want to know who is attacking me, right? Super important. And like, what is known about that particular like individual or APT group, right? Luckily, again, right, with all the threat intelligence available in the different technologies, but also that is accessible through the through MITRE with the attack framework, and they are tracking 50 plus APT groups and have tons of valuable insights in there, right? From like a quick description over to like news snippets over typical paths they operate through, right? We're trying to understand who is attacking me, right? We want to know that aspect. We want to understand then, can the attacker leverage the same methodology in order to reach other assets, right? So this goes in line in a way with, how did the attacker get in? And then I want to know, could they move to other endpoints, to other assets as well with using the same methodology? And then, of course, how do I remediate, right? How do I stop bleeding? And how do I make sure the same thing cannot happen again, right? So these are the questions that we, as SOC analysts, typically are asking ourselves, our team, as part of an incident day by day, right? We might, like, we come to the office, or nowadays we work from home. We open our laptop, we go into Slack, drop a quick line. Hey folks, I am online. I'm now I'm starting the day shift, the night shift, whatever. If you have like a follow the sun SOC, right? Typically, then we have our daily stand-up, right, with the team. It might involve like a handover, right, from the previous shift to understand what are the top activities that they encountered, what have they worked on, is there anything that needs to be handed over to my shift, right? Is there some work already on high priority that I need to continue, that I need to pick up, right? And from there, right, I spent a lot of the time on getting alerts or incidents assigned and start working on them and leveraging my my incident response process and procedures in order to understand what happened, how it happened, when it happened, and then do the remediation. Right. So these are like the typical things we are charged. Of course, as SOC analysts, we have much more things we are doing, and it also depends on the some of the like organizations, right? Some organizations might have them also do occasion like pen tests in the environment. Some might be accountable also for like vulnerability management, understanding what's out there, what are the vulnerabilities that could be leveraged, and so on and so on. But at its core, like as a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, whatever SOC analyst, our mission is to understand what's happening, and then to essentially coordinate and be the liaison, sometimes also with instant responder teams if it's a big organization, but essentially to protect, detect, and respond against cyber attacks. So when we look into SentinelOne, right, and our extended detection and response solution, right, and I pause here for a second so we really think about what is XDR, right? XDR at its core is the evolution of EDR, okay? But let's take a step back, right, and discuss this, right? So in the past, right, in the history, we used to have on the endpoints only something we call nowadays EPP, Endpoint Platform Protection, or how we used to call it, the AV, the antivirus, right? It was great because the threats were much easier back then. So typically having an AV was quote unquote sufficient for most of the time. Anyhow, at one point, we woke up from this illusion and we understood that we live in a world where we know that we will be targeted by attacks, right? We can either choose to ignore that fact, right? And we continue having our blind spots, or we acknowledge it and we become proactive about it, and we need a capability that serves us post-breach. Right, so when an attack happened, in order for us to know what has happened, how it happened, when it happened, right? And that was the born of the EDR space, endpoint detection and response. Now, at one point in the industry, we acknowledged that EPP and EDR goes hand in hand, right? Because we need to be consistent and when it comes to protect, detect, and respond, right? So that's why most vendors, including SentinelOne, and today, like also the analysts, if you look into the different reports, merged the EPP and the EDR aspect into one endpoint platform protection solution. So today, a modern EPP solution is and contains preventative measurements as well as post-breach capabilities, because essentially they married the next generation prevention capabilities, the antivirus, and the post-breach capabilities together. But then something interesting happened. Like as EDR vendors start innovating, we understood that actually we can use the same capabilities in order for us to detect and respond across different workloads, right? And we are understood that by doing so, we can help customers in order to reduce essentially like the alert fatigue, in order to help them worry less about manual correlations and so on. Because anyway, in its core, as an EDR, we are doing the heavy lifting when it comes to the correlations, connecting the dots together, through our engines. We are doing the heavy lifting by providing threat hunting capabilities, by providing security automation capabilities, and so on. So then that was a time where we understood there is something beyond the EDR space, which is the XDR space. And XDR stands for Extended Detection and Response. And our view of that is basically bring any structured data in and benefit from the Singularity platform. So what is the Singularity Platform of SentinelOne? With the Singularity Platform, the core package, let's say, right, the starting point is for us prevention and control capabilities, right? So these are the capabilities, right, in order to make sure it is essentially as difficult as possible for an attacker to get into the environment in the first place, right? This is where the traditional EPP space are, right? The next generation protection capability, prevention capabilities. The next bucket is detection and response. Okay, this is the part essentially post-breach where we are saying we want to help you detect and respond cyber attacks in your environment. As part of that, naturally, we want to be at a point, or we are at a point, where we can not only help you to do some of these things manual, like with detection and response, but we can help you in, from an automative perspective, right? For the remediation, as well as for the recovery. Like, wouldn't it be great that when you have a ransomware attack on your Windows environment, that you could roll back, right? And this is something that we've been working on, and we're excited to have in the product, where we can roll back from a ransomware attack most of the times. The fourth bucket is around providing visibility inside the network and giving you the control about the attack surface, right? Because as in the past, when we had this mindset of network perimeter defense, it was easy, quote unquote, because we would say, okay, whatever is in that particular network, it's safe, and we can control what's in the network or what's connecting into this network. But today, this network perimeter-based defense mechanism doesn't work anymore, right? Because of a variety of reasons, like bring your own device, work from home in particular, like a big driver of now people need being able to access business data from other networks, right? Folks working from coffee shops and so on and so on. And of course, also the dangerous thing, and sometimes it can happen, right? Even if you think you have a secure network, sometimes, like if it's not configured properly, someone might just walk in and connect something to an Ethernet port or connect to the Wi-Fi, and voila, they're in their network. And then depending on your configuration, they might be able to access certain things that they shouldn't have access to. So visibility into the network is fundamentally critical, right? So that's another aspect where we are helping in order to essentially detect what else is out there, like IoT devices, rogue devices, and so on. And then the last big part of the Singularity platform is the XDR automation, the extended detection and response. And we built essentially a marketplace, and we have a rich API set essentially that you can use in order to connect different sources. If you want to connect, for example, different threat intel sources, you can connect, do that. We have most of the popular ones already in the marketplace. It's a one-click integration, but then we also have bi-directional APIs in order for you to interact with the solution as you want. On top of that, what is important to highlight, feature parity is fundamental for us, right? We believe that we need to meet customers where they are when it comes to their enterprise environment, right? Like if you think about it as a SOC analyst, one of the nightmares I always have is like, we're doing our investigation, and then we realize that this one capability that I wanted to use in order to be more efficient isn't available on Mac OS, and I need to do an investigation right now on Mac OS or on Linux, or it's available on Windows, but it's not available on Windows 7. It's only available on Windows 10, 20H2, right? So having feature parity is critical, and we provide that for the most, right, across Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. But we also go beyond that and cover the cloud aspect, cloud workloads, containers, Kubernetes, and so on. We cover VDI instances as well as AWS instances, and so on. So you name it, like wherever your endpoints are, regardless server, workplace, or containers, we be able to support it. And we support it for the most with feature parity in mind, which is awesome for me as a SOC person. In addition to that, we have over 3 different services, right, that we also offer. One is intelligence-driven threat hunting. So think about threat hunting as a service, essentially. managed detection and response, right? It's an MDR service, so essentially can become an extension to your team, helping you with threat triage, remediation, and so on. And we do have a DFIR team, a digital forensics and incident response team, that is available, that we can dispatch when an incident happens, if needed, in order to do forensics work, as well as in order to assist or lead the actual incident investigation. Right. So this all together essentially is the Singularity platform of SentinelOne. But of course, we got to dive deeper, and I got to give you a demonstration of this platform. Right. So let's dive deeper. Let's talk about the platform itself. The platform itself, we created it with scalability in mind. Okay. To start with, the agent, it's an autonomous, lightweight agent. Very important to highlight, it's a lightweight agent, right? And one key differentiator, I think, in the market here is that most of the static and behavioral analysis that is AI, artificial intelligence powered, happens on the endpoint. We barely have a cloud dependency on that, right? So think about like air gap scenarios, think about regulative scenarios, right? If you want, like, you don't depend on the cloud to get some of the components of the Singularity platform, which is amazing and a big differentiator, right? And then of course, we have a wide OS coverage, including legacy operating system, and it doesn't matter, of course, if it's physical or virtual. When it comes to the Singularity platform itself, right? Think about it as a SaaS, software as a service application, right? It supports single sign-on, MFA. We have amazing capability for role-based access control, where you can really determine like this group, this person has access to this subset even of information inside the tenant. But also we have multi-tenancy support, right? So you'll be able to configure for possibly like by geo, by department, etc. The scope, right? Maybe you want to have privileged workstations or high value assets, HVA assets, only handled by by an X type of SOC analysts, right? That's totally possible with the solution. Right, and it has native, support for cloud native experiences like virtual machines, Kubernetes. It can run for AWS, GCP, as well as Azure instances as well, right? So the key point here from a Singularity platform perspective, it's very scalable and very flexible because of the investments we have done, right? You have a global scope mechanism, right? You see that on the right side of the screen, right? There can be a global scope. You can have an account scope, right? Then and then you can define the respective sites, and then you can define specific groups, and you can do dynamic grouping as well through an agentless, agentless Active Directory integration, right? You can do all this, you don't have to, right? So there's the default is also, of course, available, which is with the global scope. But as you're like probably in a bigger enterprise environment, you want to have a more flexibility and granularity. Now, when it comes to prevention and control, this is a time where we look into essentially supporting you with next generation protection capabilities, right? Firewall, USB, or portable media block and deny capabilities, Bluetooth, understanding rogue devices that are out there through discovery, app inventory, right? And then something cool, remote shell, right? Being able to remotely connect to onboarded machines in order for you to do forensics work and so on, right? Very important point, I think, here, just to stress, right? When it comes to our malware and ransomware protection, it's 100% AI based. It does not leverage any signatures. Detection, right? This is the pillar where it's one key patented technology comes to mind for me, which is Storyline. Okay, with Storyline, essentially we are checking every single process, every single activity, event individually, and we essentially connect it to the bigger context, to the bigger story that is happening. Okay, so think about it like in a way as a scoring mechanism of everything that is happening, process execution, network connection, everything, right? And then we determine by leveraging AI the likelihood if it's something suspicious or malicious, right? And this capability we then leverage in order to do our verdicts, right? If it's malicious, if it's suspicious, right? And it fuels all the other capabilities essentially inside the EDR capability, like when it comes to response, remediation, rollback, and so on, as well as for the hunting aspect, right? Great thing to know is the data is available for up to 365 days, right? So all the EDR data is up to 365 days available, and it has tight integration with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So you will get information about the tactic and techniques and so on. And to segue into MITRE, of course, we gotta highlight the MITRE ATT&CK evaluations that recently happened, right, with Carbonek and Fin7 as the APT groups that were chosen to be simulated by MITRE Ingenuity, right? Great to see, like from SentinelOne perspective, we were the only vendor that provided 100% visibility. We had the highest scores, regardless if you're talking about the highest telemetry coverage or highest analytic coverage. And important, we didn't have any miss. We didn't have any configuration changes in order to find certain activities during the evaluation. Response actions is the bread and butter, right? For us as SOC analysts, we need to be able to kill a process or container, right? Do the quarantine of a file, and we want to make sure that it's easy to do, right? Easy to change preventative measurements if we need to, easy to do forensic work by connecting remotely in, right? Because we want to reduce the mean time to response, or the short MTTR score, right? We want to make sure we automate as much as possible, right? In order to reduce the repetitive work we would be doing, right? You can do that. You see on the right side a snippet how it looks like when you do mitigations on an incident with our capability. You literally can click and choose like which mitigation action you want to take, right? And then you can go with that. And the cool thing is, you see there's a check mark apply to all instances of this threat, right? So this helps you also, so you don't have to do repetitive work when you do these mitigations. When it comes to threat hunting, right, this is the time where storyline shines together with a feature we call deep visibility, which essentially gives you access to the raw data set that is available in the tenant for you for do threat hunting activities, right? So there is by the way, a nice Chrome extension available if you want it. But basically, think about in a way that you have a query language, and with that query language, once you pick it up, you can search for certain activities that are happening, and you will get the intelligence you need without even connecting back to the different endpoints, right? It's based on the data that is already processed, right? That is available, and you can do your threat hunting activities out of that. And the cool thing is, you can create out of those queries rules, right? And you can even say, based on this rule, like if something like this happens, essentially do these remediation steps, right? So you can create these kinds of powerful rules as well, right? In addition, like you can search for MITRE ATT&CK techniques and tactics. We have two more interesting capabilities in this aspect, right? One is Cloud Funnel, the other one is Binary Vault, right? That I suggest you also to check out. Now, before we jump into the demo, essentially, I want to show you the Singularity Marketplace, right? It's our essentially integration ecosystem, right? So you see all these different categories: platform integration, deception, identity orchestration, IT operations and management, network, threat intel, CASB, cloud access, secure broker, sandbox, cloud, and CM and security analytics. Right? And you see most of the leaders and experts in these respective domains, have already capabilities available inside the marketplace, which for the most means it's a one-click integration, right? You enable it and now you benefit from it, right? So think about like bringing in like Netscope from a CASB perspective, right? ServiceNow integration. If you have Threat Intel subscription, like from Recorded Future, inside Threat Connect or Reversing Labs, right? You can connect that in, right? Okta integration, CM integrations with Splunk, IBM, Curata, as well as AT&T's capabilities there, right? Just to name a few, right? And we are constantly pushing the boundaries here to bring in more partners in to the marketplace. All right, so now we're diving right into the demo. You see on the top left side, the attacker environment's a Kelly box. I pre-populated some of the aspects already and automated it. But basically, there's a MetaPreter session that we're going to open up and do a lot of bad stuff to the computer on the bottom left side. It's a Windows 10 box that is the endpoint protected with the SentinelOne autonomous and lightweight agent. On the right side, you see the SentinelOne console. Right now, no threats there. The queue is empty. So in theory, you can sit back and relax as the analyst. But we're about to change that very fast. And also important to highlight, this is a detect mode demo, right? So if the prevention capabilities were enabled, this scenario would not work, right? I deliberately disabled prevention in order for you to see how to detect and respond to an attack by leveraging the SentinelOne platform. So typical scenario, I get this Word document with a malicious macro file. As the user, I hit accept and yes everywhere, of course, right? I hit enable editing, and this is triggering a MetaPreter session. And as you can see here in real time, the new threat is now available. If I click in that threat, we already get a lot of valuable information that saves me manual correlation or manual forensics work. So under threat indicators, I know already that we are leveraging here a penetration framework. I know based on MITRE's attack frameworks, tactics and techniques where it maps to for this particular threat. This one also gives me the information that it is a Metasploit stager, right? And it gives me insights on how, like on the evasion side, right? So I know already that this is an Office program that ran a macro file, which is awesome. I can take notes if I want to inside that threat, right? So identified Metasploit stager and looking into it now. All right, hit send. And now that is saved in here. I get a lot of information around the file, as well as the endpoint level. I can click on Hunt now to get more information based on the raw data that is exposed also. And under Explore, I get the storyline as it builds up, right? So we'll go into segue here back later to show you more information. So now as I automated this particular attack, you will start seeing I'm doing a process migration there with code through code injection. So you see already I didn't leave like to another alert or something, right? We are correlating this information into the existing threat that you're investigating. So we were at this point. Right now, we started the injection part, right? So we know already code injection into a remote process, code injection to other process memory space. We have reflection. So these two activities has happened, right? And again, the information get automatically enriched, right? You see this also like in the timeline perspective. Here, I'm going to go to the overview, right? And now as I want to bypass the UAC, the user account control, you will see again that as the attacker is progressing, you will start seeing the relevant informations to start feeding into the thread, right? So as you saw, there's an automatic refresh. I didn't have to refresh the browser. I didn't have to wait like for some cloud processing or something because the analysis happened on the cloud or whatsoever, right? In real time, the information is updated. I already know that they're doing a privilege escalation by attempting to bypass the UAC, right? Again, this I can take, right, if I want to hit on hunt now in order to get more visibility into that. And yes, so this can continue right throughout this attack cycle, right? So the key takeaway here is, right, as the attacker is going on, there is no, this is a real-time solution where you get real-time information on what is happening without the refresh, without to worry that there are now 15 different threats or alerts or incidents, however you want to call them, available, right? And the beauty, the attack is expanding and giving you all the contextual information that you need so that when you believe the time is right, you can click on actions, mitigate actions, and then choose the response actions that are the most appropriate for you. You want to kill the process, go ahead, highlight that. You want to kill and quarantine the file, you can do that. You want to remediate also the aspects, so right, the remediation, we're looking at to delete all the files and system changes that has been performed through that threat. And even if it's like a Windows based computer, we are able to roll back to a previously known good state as well. And then the good thing is, again, you can say, hey, apply this to all instances of this threat, right? So one click and all that is happening, right? I can also choose how to handle, and the threats are marked as resolved. It's a true positive, right? So let me go ahead and just kill this process. And there you go, right? So this incident now has been handled in the context of I contained the threat. And now, of course, what we were discussing earlier as part of the incident response life cycle, right? We want to go to the point now where we want to make sure prevention is in place and also the cleanup, right? We want to make sure we clean up all persistence methods and so on and so on. And then do the lessons learned, right? The post incident activities. I think the bottom line here is that you have the opportunity to move from a reactive line of work, reactive kind of thinking, into being more proactive. Okay, we are able to help reduce the alert volume, and with that, the alert fatigue. We're able to help you managing alerts much more efficient, and through our automation capabilities, we help you focus on what truly matters the most, rather than doing repetitive work that our system can take care of it, right? To summarize, really, I think the pain points of us as SOC analysts is very clear, right? We have too many tools, we have too much noise. It takes a lot of manual labor in order to protect, detect, and respond. It takes too much time to document stuff, to communicate information to different stakeholders. So now, with the SentinelOne technology, you get an industry-leading technology that can help you as an EPP, EDR, and XDR solution, right? You can reduce the amount of tools in your environment dramatically with one autonomous agent that is lightweight. The industry tests are showing it, latest MITRE attack evaluation, where we had 100% visibility, the highest amount of analytical coverage, telemetry coverage, with no misses, no configuration changes required on our side. So with that, I want to thank you so much for listening into this workshop. I hope it was a good use of your time, and I wish you a terrific, nice day. Have a good day.